America, it's time for some straight talk. You love your phone. Look at you. You hardly put it down. But you don't love that expensive wireless plan, do you? So what if I told you can keep that phone network and number 2 for a lot less? Well, this is me telling you. It's time to switch to Straight Talk, guys. Bring your own phone and get unlimited plans starting at just $45 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks. Straight Talk Wireless. Only at Walmart.
Savings may vary. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
This is the best of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
It's Friday, Sarah. It's Izzy Gutierrez and Sarah Spain in for Dan Le Batard and Stugotz today on ESPN Radio. And that's the best thing I could say about today. It is Friday.
It's Friday?
Yep.
You cranky today, buddy?
I'm not cranky. No, I'm in a pretty decent mood. I've got good energy. Like, I'm all right. I just keep sort of scanning the television and my computer every day, and I'm just like, come on, like
something happened.
Like,
give me something.
Everything seems to be the same.
People really like it when we don't talk about sports, so we could talk about anything. The return of DuckTales.
Wait, DuckTales?
DuckTales
you didn't
back.
know?
No.
Yeah.
Like on a daily commercial, a daily cartoon?
Well, it's not a daily cartoon
Like a
because that was a
Saturday
syndication,
cartoon.
so I think there'll be a new episode every week. But yeah, DuckTales coming back, baby.
With my buddy Danny Pudi, who was on Community.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've
then
never
that
actually
show,
said his name out loud.
Powerless. Pudi. Oh, you didn't know his name was Pudi.
I actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, it doesn't matter what the heck we talk about, because I just saw this and I had no idea this was the case, and it kind of breaks my heart, and it's ruining, like, my world right now. Are Anna Faris
terrible.
and
I
Chris
can't
Pratt
wait.
really splitting up? I had no idea. How behind am I on this?
You're pretty behind on a lot of things.
Okay.
Yes, Beyonce was
just
pregnant,
found out Beyonce
and
was
she
pregnant.
had her twins. Yeah, supposedly they are splitting, although there is a update from Patty Stranger, also known as the Millionaire Matchmaker, and I don't know what she has to do with them, but she claims that they're still living together despite their recent split. Now, of course, that means nothing, because we all know that Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner were living together for quite some time after their split while he was boning the nanny. So I don't think that, and that's allegedly whatever. I don't know if it means anything that they're still living together, but maybe that means it's not such a terribly dramatic estrangement that there's no sign that they could possibly get back together.
I saw this quote from some source, told the New York Post. They're very competitive with each other. At parties, they compete over who's funniest and get insecure if they're not. He's also very, very religious, and she's not religious.
Okay, that sounds like something that someone who's like never met them before would say, right?
Yeah,
like,
but it also sounds like something a comedian would
right,
do.
For sure. Like, I understand that if they're both like kind of in the spotlight and they both like to be the type A and whatever, that can be problematic in a relationship. As a type A spotlight-seeking person, I had to do some soul-searching myself throughout my life of whether I needed to find someone that was exactly like me or slightly different. And as it turns out, slightly different is a much better choice. So maybe they're two alike is what they're saying. But the way that was described, where like they need to be the funnier person and then they get sad if they're not, sounds like someone who's never met them.
Yeah, maybe.
Right?
But
did you ever know that he used to make her eat squirrel?
What?
Yeah, so he's like a good old boy, and he was used to like eating squirrels, and he and his brother-in-law, I think, had a tradition like that became out of Anna Faris's brother finding out that he hunted and ate squirrels and deciding that should be their new tradition. So during the holidays, they go out and hunt squirrel, grill it, and then like make her eat it.
Make her eat it?
Well, they eat it too.
Okay.
No, but he likes eating it. He thinks squirrel is a perfectly appropriate thing to eat. And then once they became married, she decided that she had to be in on it.
Then that's why they should be splitting up. That's exactly why she's splitting up with him. All that other stuff is just nonsense. It's clearly
it's not about needing to be the funniest comedian. It's about being forced to eat squirrel.
Right. Speaking of nothing to talk about, I did want to go backward in time because I did want to discuss Kyrie Irving a little bit, if you're okay with that, Sarah.
Of course.
There's a couple of things that are funny to me. I saw this Charles Barkley quote, and we have sound of it played for you here in a second. But the criticisms of Kyrie Irving have been funny, but they've also been kind of all over the place. Charles Barkley here basically said that the idea of Kyrie wanting to leave to, quote, be the man is kind of idiotic.
You want to be on a good team you want to play with other great players. This notion where you want to be the man, I just think it's so stupid. Like, if I got a chance to play with another great player, I want to do that. I mean, the objective is to win. When you're on a bad team, when he was on a bad team and he was the man, I guarantee you that wasn't a lot of fun for him. And now you want to lead the best player in the world. I hear all this stuff about LeBron cast a big shadow. He should cast a big shadow.
What does that sound like to you, other than contradictory to what he's said in the past about other players? What does that sound like to you in terms of this Kyrie situation?
Listen, I respect the idea that it's very odd to want to leave a team that has made the finals 3 straight years and is the only team with even a reasonable shot of contending with the Warriors, at least based on previous performance, not accounting for recent trades. So that stands out to me, and I respect and agree with that part of it. But ever since the beginning of Kyrie and Bretton Windhorst report about how he wanted out because, he wanted to be the 1A and everything else, the more you look into it, the less that is as simple and black and white as it sounds. It's not that he's unwilling to play with other great players. It's not that he needs to be the man. It's that LeBron's shadow, which is an incredibly overwhelming one, and interacting with and playing alongside and being a teammate with LeBron is old to him. Because some of the teams that he said he wanted to go to have very big 1A type stars. Kawhi Leonard, who is an MVP candidate. Now, his style and his way of being is nowhere near like LeBron in terms of the shadow that he casts, but he's a great player. And the Timberwolves, playing alongside Jimmy Butler, Karl Anthony Towns, like, he wasn't requesting teams that were devoid of talent where he could be the guy. It's just a different situation than in Cleveland. So I get what Barkley's saying, but I think it's simplistic to argue that Kyrie is not understanding the way the NBA works anymore and doesn't get that he needs to align himself with other stars.
By the way, I know there was some preseason football played yesterday. We'll get to some of that. A little later, we'll talk to Marc Trestman about 11:30 and get to some football there. But I did wanted to start here because that, first of all, Sarah, to me, that sounds, like I said, very contradictory to his criticisms of, wasn't it LeBron James? Wasn't it these guys seeking these superstar teammates to play with? And now he's saying being the man is dumb. Wanting to do it by yourself is dumb. You want that superstar teammate if you have them. I mean, to me, that sounds like an entirely different take by Charles Barkley. But it also sounds to me like somebody who's still caught in, like you mentioned, a little bit simplistic. It's still caught in the old way of thinking when it comes to the way the players see themselves, right? In terms of, okay, being the man just doesn't mean, hey, my usage rate's going to shoot up, going to get more shots, going to get more accolades. It also means I'm going to get more attention. I'm going to get more sales of my sneakers, whichever ones I have, whether you have a signature shoe like Kyrie or not. I'm going to have more commercials. I'm going to have more opportunities. And when I envision Kyrie, as much as I have a hard time envisioning him as a guy who can be the primary scorer, the most responsible playmaker on a championship level team, I could absolutely see him blowing up to be, an NBA superstar in the terms of the way the youth and the audience embraces him. Like, he's got that type of game. He's got that style to him where the commercials can be sick, the highlight films can be sick, and he's already got the signature shoe success. Like, that was also in large part thanks to LeBron, but
right.
I'm looking at something right now,
and
he's the second highest selling
that team.
Yeah, second highest selling signature shoe behind LeBron, ahead of Steph, ahead of Kevin Durant, ahead of, James Harden. But that to me tells me he's set up. He's set up to make that next leap into the way, in terms of the sports fans' consciousness, as a standalone superstar, regardless of how he actually translates to on the floor. I think you could look at it that way or the opposite way, which is he is already set up, and if he leaves this situation, there's no guarantee that remains, right? That there's possibly an affiliation with LeBron and the Cavs that has motivated the sales of his shoe. If he goes off somewhere else, is it really about him, or was it about the success that he had with LeBron and with the Cavs? And specifically to sneakers, that's not really how it works, because if that shoe was ugly, it doesn't matter how good LeBron was, nobody's buying it.
Right, like
people like his shoe. It's a good-looking shoe, and that's going to stay relevant, and the sales are going to stay, especially, again, in terms of the type of player. Like, this is maybe where Steph kind of messed up with the shoe gig. Like, it's also, hey, relatability. Like, maybe I can play like Kyrie Irving. I can get that handles. Let me go get those shoes and try to do exactly what he does. But to your point there in terms of that it might go away, that's why I'm curious as to why he selected the teams he selected in terms of where he wanted to go. Because I can see them going differently. I can see, obviously, his career going differently depending on which one of those cities he goes to. And it also makes the most sense to me when you hear, I don't know, was it Stephen A. who said this? Somebody reported that, it's Pablo Torre reported that New York is his top choice. That makes all the sense in the world because all those elements come together then to a city starving for not necessarily a superstar because they have Carmelo, but I guess a still relevant superstar and one that can bring the sizzle back into New York even if it doesn't bring the playoff success.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, I think, in looking at Barkley's comments, I think we all reacted to the Irving news the same way because none of us saw it coming. So we all thought he's being impetuous. He's turning himself away from a really good situation in Cleveland. He needs to, take a step back and not be overwhelmed by like emotions or whatever. But Dave McMenamin during the B-Ball Breakdown NBA podcast said that Kyrie Irving during the playoffs, in between the first round when they beat Indiana and then when they went on to play Toronto, would go consecutive days without speaking to a single teammate at practice. Now that, to me, is a sign that this is not some impetuous move and that for whatever ability he had to keep his discomfort or his displeasure under wraps for as long as he did, by the time he decided to go to the front office and ask for a trade and still did that under wraps and might have not even gotten out had not he accuses, or whoever the sources accuse LeBron of leaking it, but that there was a lot more to this, and it was building and building, and he had gotten so unhappy that even in the most important of moments during the postseason, he was not talking to teammates. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, that's a whole nother angle, and I want to get into that in a second. We'll do that on the other side here.
Hey, buddy, the wait is over. It's the 2017 Suey Awards. Starting August 21st, the Suey Awards. Dan Le Batard.
Ooh. Guillermo, sassy.
Stugotz.
You're sexy when you're sassy.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
I'm sorry, Sarah. You have a bobblehead doll?
Yeah, tomorrow's my bobblehead night.
Okay, how did this come about? Bobblehead night, what? MLS soccer?
It's Chicago Red Stars, so women's professional league. Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, the Red Stars, the Chicago team, they reached out to me a couple months ago and asked if I would be willing to do a bobblehead night, and I said, obviously, that's super cool. So tomorrow, yeah.
Did you have any say in the posing and the design or anything about the bobblehead?
Well, they asked me to send a photo, and so I sent. The Chicago Magazine here did like a profile on me with me all in sports gear, like various jerseys and hats and foam fingers and everything else. So it seemed appropriate for a bobblehead of me being a fan. So I just sent that along, and they kind of tweaked it using Red Stars gear.
That's pretty cool. Not many people can say that.
Yeah,
right?
And they were selling it separately. Like the first 400 fans tomorrow get it. And you could buy it with a ticket, but then they were selling it separately, and then it sold out because apparently enough people wanted bobblehead of me, which was surprising and weird, but awesome.
Pretty, I don't know if it's weird. I don't know if it's surprising
I'm
either.
like Tony Reale. Remember, he got that minor league baseball bobblehead where he was sitting around the horn desk and had the buttons and everything.
I remember. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey, did you see the NBA Christmas games lineup?
Yes.
What'd you think? For those who don't know, the NBA released opening night games and Christmas games as sort of a tease to their schedule release. We've got opening with 76ers, Knicks, Cavs, Warriors, again. Wizards, Celtics is kind of, in terms of like the placement of it, looks like the highlighted game when it's really not. There's, I think, 3 ABC games. That one's in the middle. And the third is Rockets, Thunder. And then Wolves-Lakers is the 5th and final one overall, and that one, I forget what network, I think that's TNT. What'd you think about that lineup?
I actually really like it. I mean, 76ers Knicks isn't great on the face of it, but the Knicks are a good draw because people always like talking about the Knicks. if they're a garbage fire or if they're good. And the idea of Porzingis, people getting a good look at him. If Carmelo Anthony is around, that'll make it more interesting. If he's traded, maybe not. I mean, it's not great on the face because it's not two great teams, but people, I think, are enjoying watching the development of the Sixers. So I could see why they might put that one there and then have the big market draw of a New York team. Cavs at Warriors, obviously a great matchup. Wizards at Celtics, two teams in the East that people think are gaining on the Cavs. It might have a chance, particularly with the trades in the offseason that have beefed up the Celtics. So I could see that one, being a good draw. Rockets Thunder, always good. You get that new look Rockets team against Russell Westbrook and company. The Wolves and Lakers one, again, I think they're trying to play off the big market of LA, and then the Wolves being a team that, again, people want to see sort of the new combinations and the young star in Karl Anthony Towns.
Well, 76ers Knicks, first of all. Does that sound like something the league is kind of saying, man, I hope the Knicks make a big move, or man, I hope they get Kyrie Irving, or something like that? Because we already know the appeal of the Sixers. If all their young players are healthy, I don't even think by Christmas definitely not by Christmas, we won't be tired of seeing them yet. Like if Simmons and Embiid and Fultz are all out there and putting on a show, like that's going to be intriguing. And frankly, who knows how many times people will have seen them nationally already by the time Christmas rolls around. But the Knicks, like I think it can't just be the big market thing. Like I know that's obviously the fallback, and you're always going to have that. But I mean, last year, the Knicks were a problem for national television. The last half of the year, they were on the schedule so many times, and it was just like, ugh, like, how do we get out of this, right? And sometimes they could, sometimes they couldn't. And they're starting off early with this. They're putting them on the Christmas lineup right away, and it's tough because it's the Eastern Conference, and there's not that very many good teams. And frankly, I thought, only the Wizards and Celtics on the East would even make that lineup, Christmas Day lineup. But to go with the Knicks, like, either the league maybe knows something or is hopeful of something, because I think maybe if they get Kyrie Irving, obviously that becomes quite the Christmas Day, appealing game.
Right. I agree with you that they are certainly hoping for something. I don't know if it's that they know anything based on the idea that, it's still a giant market. And even though the Knicks are kind of trash, like you're going to get a big audience coming out of that market. So it's a solid choice. And I guess there's probably a feeling that if you are a real NBA fan, then that's a game where you want to watch the young Sixers and then Porzingis, development guys.
Have the Warriors Cavs in the regular season, has that run its course? Because to me, I thought they got that one wrong. Like, they won too many.
No, I think it's good, assuming that they actually play. What we saw last year is all the anticipated matchups between like the Spurs and the Warriors got ruined by rest. And so, if they're actually at full strength, then we feel like it's a reasonable indicator of how those two teams match up, then it's great. Unfortunately, I doubt that's going to happen.
I would have gone differently. I would have gone entirely differently there. I thought Warriors Thunder was the way to go there. Because you still got the Durant-Westbrook thing. And even though, it probably doesn't have legs in terms of their personal relationship, that matchup is still intriguing. And you've got the Paul George element there, too, to sort of add a different dimension to it. And, on Christmas, it just would have been, to me, the best way to go. And you sort of match up the Cavs with maybe the Rockets, if you will, and go, good buddies, LeBron and Chris Paul. And I like the Wolves-Lakers thing. You're highlighting Lonzo Ball. You're getting the Lakers some good time before, their record falls below playoff contention. And the Wolves obviously need some attention because they're loaded now. But I think the Cavs-Warriors thing has kind of run its course in the regular season.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. I don't think it has. I think that's still the marquee matchup of the two teams that have met. And whether or not you believe that they really are enemies and dislike each other, even though, LeBron and Draymond are part of the same company and definitely don't seem like they really hate each other. You can build that up as one of the best rivalries right now. So I buy it. But, who knows what's going to happen between now and then? Certainly feels like there could be changes to the Cavs roster, and that could affect things in a big way.
And we'll get back to that Kyrie not talking to his teammates thing. Just got sidetracked by those Christmas games because I thought, I remember a few years ago, I think it was Heat-Lakers was the constant Christmas, and it went one too many years on Christmas Day, and it kind of took the appeal out of it a little bit.
Are you usually working?
Yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm probably going to be at one of those games, and my guess is I'll be at one of the Eastern Conference games because it's closer.
Yeah, because my family, like when the Bulls used to play on Christmas Day, we'd always be like we were doing other family stuff, and like we would kind of keep an eye on it at my aunt and uncle's house, but we were glued to it enough that we would watch the end, but the rest of the family wasn't into it, so we seemed kind of rude if I was out in the other room watching it. Huh. And now it's just really not a part of my day because my family's not into it at all.
I'll tell you a funny story about the last Christmas Day game. I worked on the other side, Christmas Day game.
I want to hear about the Christmas gay game.
Well, I mean,
if you could tell that story.
It's Christmas. It's always gay.
It's just regular Christmas.
Dan Lebatard.
Michael Jordan never scored 70 in a game.
No, but he scored 60-something in a legendary playoff game that they won.
Stugotz.
They lost.
Did they really?
They lost, yeah.
Wow, breaking news.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
This is the Dan Lebatard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Sarah, did you watch your Bears?
I did.
And you stuck through to the end to watch Trubisky, or you
Well, he came in with time left in the first half, so I didn't have to wait too long. But, of course, I started watching. I just, we had the night off because we hosted this show yesterday from our nightly show. Right. And so I was super excited to just be home and watch a game and sit on the couch. And, of course, Mike Glennon threw a pick six on his first drive. And I was like, here we are again, Jay Glennon. No matter who you put in that spot, it's going to be the same thing all over again. So I was being very cynical, knowing full well that it means nothing. And the preseason is when you're supposed to figure things out, so we really shouldn't care whether a guy plays poorly or well. Although there are elements, I think, that you can look at to gauge, how someone, at least how comfortable they look and how their passes look. So Mark Sanchez came in for 2 drives and didn't do much. And then Trubisky came in, and again, playing second, third team defense. It's a
preseason
you had
Sanchez
game.
Too.
Yeah. That's what, there was a great tweet last night. It was like, your team is really good when after you throw a pick six and post a 0.0 QB rating, then you bring in Mark Sanchez. But anyway, Trubisky came in, and even though it was a second or third team defenses, and even though it's a preseason game, it doesn't mean anything, he looked fantastic. He hit all of his throws on the run. He was mostly out of the pocket. I think they were trying to keep him a little bit more comfortable, but he looked fantastic. So and as I heard Louis Riddick say, if he'd been terrible, we would have been perfectly happy talking about how terrible he was, if he overthrew passes, if he threw picks. So the fact that he was good, we should treat that with the same, amount of import that we would had he been absolutely terrible.
How was the body language? Did he give you a fist pump at all?
Great body language.
Anti-Jay Cutler?
I wouldn't say he was anti-Jay. He wasn't, showy in any way. He just kind of went out and got the job done. But he certainly didn't have, bitter beer face and wasn't trudging around. So also he hasn't established himself yet. And part of Jay Cutler was that everyone was looking for it. Like literally the cameramen would wait till they had the perfect shot of him pouting on the sidelines and only show that one and not the ones where he was smiling. So until Mitch establishes himself as some sort of bitter beer face, I think he'll be all right.
Like I'm starting to get to the point where I don't care anymore if people criticize me or anybody for analyzing based on body language, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of truth to it. There's a lot of things you can read into it, like this Kyrie Irving, LeBron James situation. A lot of people could have told you from the very beginning those two don't really get along. Kyrie doesn't really like him. The way he answers questions about LeBron is kind of odd and doesn't really feel like they get along. And now you see all this stuff come out, and it's like, yeah, they kind of didn't. And you hear this from Dave McMenamin, who he did this on B-Ball Breakdown podcast, was talking about the potential of Kyrie going to Phoenix, right, via trade. And Phoenix now has James Jones in the front office, was a teammate of Kyrie's the last few years. Basically, he's been a teammate of LeBron's for the last decade, it feels like. And he said this about James Jones seeing Kyrie Irving. He said, quote, he saw Kyrie Irving in the playoffs this year, in between the first round when they beat Indiana and the second round when they played Toronto, go consecutive days without speaking to a teammate at practice on that stage. It's one thing for people to go through your ups and downs during the regular season, but when you get to the playoffs, the main thing is the main thing, and we're brothers, and we're pulling together to get this thing done. And he sort of stopped there, but basically saying that's surprising to see from somebody of Kyrie Irving's stature, somebody of Kyrie Irving's importance to a team, and obviously the implication being there that a GM wouldn't like that about Kyrie.
Right. I mean, for sure. But again, this is, and of course, if it's Kyrie not talking, that is, of course, like he's the one who's at fault for that. But you don't know what preceded it. And we've seen Kyrie a couple different times push back a little bit on LeBron. The one that I always talk about that stands out is when LeBron said, I'm like a father figure to him, and Kyrie was like, no, I have a father. But we saw those little hints of it. And I think the fact that there are people that are so frustrated with Kyrie says a lot about where we place our emphasis, and it's on the best player. Because LeBron, for sure, has spent way more time complaining and throwing his teammates under the bus and being passive aggressive and criticizing his upper management. He's the best player in the NBA right now. So you give him a lot more slack than you do Kyrie. But that's not to say that Kyrie should be unhappy and feel like he's working with a bad teammate all the time and never speak out.
Yeah. It does kind of make me happy to see that, like I said, in terms of like the body language stuff, because now I feel like I've been, I'm justified for just trying to read into everything. Like, never again will I be in the playoffs saying, let me not read too much into that. It's intense. It's the playoffs. These things are happening. Nah, I'm pretty sure there's going to be something there. And, whether we get the answer 5 minutes from then or 5 months from then, pretty sure a lot of us are going to be right. I don't know if it's just because, they're right in front of our faces. They're not wearing helmets and, we see all that interaction and everything else. Or maybe we see too much. But it feels like in the NBA, you can sort of dissect that stuff quicker than in any other sport.
Well, and it feels like it's now part of our job. Le Batard's been talking a lot about ever since this story came out, like this is now part of the purview is feelings.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out someone's feelings is now part of the job. Reporting on feelings as a beat reporter. And while I think it's still dangerous to make assumptions from outside, that's kind of what we do. Right? A lot of reckless speculation, a lot of trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. And as much as people will complain about it, they like it. It's drama. It's, like I said, Sweet Valley High in the NBA. People like the way that, and for all the complaining about this little back and forth and all these machinations behind the scenes, it's made the NBA incredibly interesting, and it's made them interesting year-round in a way that they weren't before. Just a couple of years ago, we did not have off-season movements the way we do now. We didn't have collusion between, and it's not technically collusion, although I think the NBA should probably revisit that rule, considering that players have a lot more stake than they ever used to in trying to turn each other into, in free agency, where they go and where they're headed. But yeah, I mean, we like watching all the drama, and it's forced us to talk about the NBA year round in ways that we only used to really do with football.
Baseball needs some drama. Like, they need some of that.
They do. They need some
Life.
beefs. People need to fight more.
I used to hate the idea of having to report on that stuff or trying to dig in on that stuff. Now I love it. Like, I love the idea of it. And the only thing that bugs me is how it's sourced a lot of the times. This one drives me crazy. Such and such, a person familiar with such and such is thinking. Like, that drives me insane. Like, I could say I'm familiar with LeBron James thinking. I've seen all the decisions he's made over the past several, 13, 14 years. And so,
like
whoever claims to be in a circle, whoever claims to be in an inner circle, I kind of question. But anyway, it's still a lot of fun. And frankly, like, you're right. That's what's made this whole NBA offseason.
Catch more of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz, 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Hi, everyone. Stugotz here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz, STUGOTZ, equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Dan Le Batard.
Oscar Robinson had 41 triple-doubles back in 61-62. 41.
Stugotz.
It's Robertson, but...
Big O.
Okay, but...
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
The name is Spain, but they call me the commish, C-O-M-M-I-S-H. You don't want to mess with this. Step into the grid and I'll rule your world. The show's alpha male is a ball-busting girl. When you pick your fate, you know I'll make it stick. Save your excuses, yo, they don't mean The horrors of the grid, best believe the hype. Like sand to your neck or a bowl full of tripe. Running like Baywatch, eating a whale. A whole damn show with your hand in a pail. Call me up when you need me to rule. You get so nervous you start to drool. Stomach is twisting, now you're clenching your butts. Sick like you ate 36 donuts. Please take it easy on us, please, Sarah Spain. You know I'm bringing the pain. The name is Spain, but they call me the commish. A velvet glove with an iron fist. Fat face Dan and his little wiener friend. In case you didn't hear me, gonna say it again. The name is Spain, but they call me the commish. A velvet glove with an iron fist. Fat face Dan and the wiener stew. Never forget who I am to you. I'm the commish. Don't F with this. I'm the commish.
Award-winning music. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance, creators of the Name Your Price tool. Choose from a range of coverage options and pick the price that works for you. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And now your SportsCenter update. Philadelphia Eagles safety Malcolm Jenkins stood at the 43-yard line and raised a fist over his head during the national anthem prior to Thursday's preseason opener at Green Bay. Earlier in the day, Jenkins told ESPN he plans on continuing his demonstration throughout the 2017 season. Neymar will be available to make his Paris Saint-Germain debut away from, Guingamp this weekend after Barcelona cashed the entire 222-pound, is that pound, euros, fee to trigger the player's release.
I believe that's euros.
Is it euros?
It's not involving a British team.
The SportsCenter is brought to you by JCPenney. Guys, get to JCPenney and save big on select items throughout the store. Caught me again. Find great brands like Levi's 502 regular fit jeans for $39.99 or get 25% off select styles of Nike tees, shorts, shoes, and backpacks. That's getting your pennies worth. JCPenney for all the latest headlines and information. Tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. It's a little tiny euro sign. Got it.
I like it when you're reading those because then I don't miss Stugotz so much. It's like he's here.
Yeah, no, this is that's how you know somehow, some way we're related. So I know you saw some of the Chicago Bears football game yesterday. I didn't see but a couple of minutes of Dolphins-Falcons. The Falcons seemed to look good. It really annoyed me because a lot of the time I was watching was on mute, and it seemed like every time they went to a sideline shot, they found a way to get Jay Cutler and Dan Marino in the same frame, and they needed to stop that. Just stop it. They should not be in the same frame or conversation or breath or sentence at all.
You guys were all super excited about the lack of expectations for Cutler, and this is going to be great, and blah, blah, blah. But you're going to get all the same narratives and storylines. You're going to hear the Jeff George comparisons. It's going to be very similar. It's just going to be on a loop. And it's funny because somebody yesterday tweeted me and was like, you're talking to the Dolphins folks like we Broncos people were talking to you when you got him. And it feels like the cycle is starting all over again.
A little bit, although I think we kind of know who Jay Cutler is.
Of course, way more than we did. We had Happy Jay Cutler Day when they signed him. We were so excited. We didn't know the roller coaster we were in for. You guys know far more.
Here they have Smoking Jay Cutler Day.
Exactly. Totally. Smoking Jay Cutler Day is much more accurate. You know what you're getting. But that being said, I do think that there are some patterns that we're seeing, and I mentioned them yesterday. The fact that his first day at practice, it was just beat reporters all over Miami, like, look at this arm, wow! And that is just so familiar to us year after year.
You got to understand, though, that's not really the strength of the quarterbacks that have been here since Marino. To see
that was the same with us. We were excited about Kyle Orton before him. Look at this. That pass went further than 10 yards.
Yep. That dude could party a little bit. What were the highlights of yesterday? Was it that Malcolm Jenkins continuing his anthem? Because I didn't even know that until this morning. His anthem demonstration with his fist in the air. I didn't know that until this morning. It didn't feel like it gets nearly as much attention
of course
as
not.
Last year's.
Right, well, that's why it can't be a highlight because nobody's talking about it. Nobody knows about it. There's a story about it on ESPN.com I would not have heard about. I knew Malcolm Jenkins had shown support for Kaepernick in the past by holding up the fist during the anthem, but the fact that he's still doing it and he plans on continuing it the entire season, And he says exactly what Kaepernick said. I'm raising it as a solidarity to support people of color who were and are still unjustly losing their lives at the hands of officers with little or no consequence. After spending time with police officers on ride-alongs, meeting with politicians on the state and federal level, and grassroots organizations fighting for human rights, it's clear that our criminal justice system is still crippling communities of color throughout mass incarceration. That was his statement. He goes on to talk about what he's standing for. And he raised a fist above his head for every game except for one in 2016. The only one he didn't was September 11th. He considered that respect for those who served and died on that day, but plans to demonstrate the whole rest of this season. No one's talking about it. No one's protesting. No one's showing up at the games. No one's calling him a distraction. And that's because at this point, Kaepernick has turned into something that's been a battle of right versus left, political ideologies versus other political ideologies, instead of what it's really about. Malcolm Jenkins is showing you exactly how it can be done and how a team can handle it, and people who don't want to accept that Colin Kaepernick and whatever team signs him could do the same are being intentionally ignorant, in my opinion.
But isn't this just as much about Colin Kaepernick being a quarterback as opposed to somebody in Malcolm Jenkins, who, if you weren't an Eagles fan or an avid NFL fan, you wouldn't really know who he was?
Right, but I don't think most people knew who Colin Kaepernick was who wasn't an avid NFL fan. Okay. Quarterbacks more for sure than other position players. Absolutely.
The guy played in the Super Bowl. I think you would have to be maybe a slightly more than a fringe NFL fan, but the guy quarterbacked in the Super Bowl, I think if you are an NFL fan, you know who he is, and that position carries with it so much more importance in general. I think that has a lot more to do with why Malcolm Jenkins is not getting the proper the attention or nearly as much as Colin Kaepernick did, than with the people just saying, I've heard this before, throw your hands in the air, it doesn't matter. Because I think the idea for those who still make this a them against the flag situation will get worked up regardless of who it is. Right.
If it was Cam Newton, if it was another African-American player who was a quarterback, or even maybe Odell Beckham Jr., a higher profile name, for sure that would be getting way more publicity than Malcolm Jenkins. But I think this is a perfect example of how the Kaepernick story has gotten so blown up, and there's so many different arguments and ways that people want to view it and prisms that they want to view it through, that it's become about not the thing anymore and not the point that he was trying to make. It's now just about, literally it's been politicized.
Yeah, and I also think it's super simplistic when you consider the idea of kneeling just looks less respectful than putting your hand in the air.
I don't agree with that, though.
You don't think so?
I actually think kneeling looks much more peaceful than doing what is essentially the Black Rights Black Panther symbol.
I think kneeling is closer to sitting. I think kneeling is closer to dismissive overall, as opposed to adding a cause to your support. You're standing for the flag while doing something else that shows a different kind of support.
I suppose, except for everybody who argues against Colin Kaepernick's means of protesting, when someone says, well, what do you want him to do? That is literally a peaceful protest, right? I think kneeling feels much more submissive than the Black Panther fist, right? If you're trying to passively protest something, there is nothing more passive than taking a knee. I understand your point about feeling like it's disrespectful because you're not standing for it.
Yeah. I think if you separate it from acknowledging the flag, I think in the act itself, yes, kneeling is by definition seemingly more peaceful looking than a fist in the air. But again, when the first thing you're supposed to do during these anthems is stand, he's at least doing that part, and Colin is not doing that part. So you take away the peacefulness of it, you immediately replace it with the disrespectful aspect, at least from those who see it that way first.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. But I also feel like the history behind the Black Panther fist, to me, says more than a kneel does.
Here's what else I think contributes to them not even being close to getting equal blowback, if you will. It feels like, as opposed to last year when a lot of people said, who is this Colin Kaepernick? What right does he have to make this protest, to be the face of it, the voice of it? Malcolm Jenkins, after not only a year of this discussion and these sort of these things that you go and you seek more, activism, if you will. After a year of having all that, he's better supported. He's better armed with information. He's not a guy you can say, oh, what does he know? He's just kind of doing this for attention, blah, blah, blah. He seems like he's ready to counter you with anything that you have coming his way. And people don't want to hear that. They just want to get mad and say, hey, how dare you? Who are you? And they want to criticize Colin Kaepernick for seemingly not being the right voice for this movement. And I think the more prepared these guys are to verbalize, to say what they need to say, to have this information and to counter all these arguments, then I think the less people are going to just be randomly loud and say, hey, I don't like that.
Right. I mean, I do think he's seen the backlash against Kaepernick and has very carefully put together a statement that speaks to the purpose of his protests. And that's something that people questioned, I think, when Kaepernick started. He also is a flawed messenger in terms of, wearing the pig socks and the Castro shirt. Like, those distracted from the message he was really trying to send. They were immature. They were misguided. They were wrong. That doesn't mean his entire message is wrong. It doesn't mean that wearing those socks or that shirt is worse than any number of crimes we've actually seen people commit and then be welcomed back to the NFL. But I think you're right that Jenkins seems to have had enough time or enough forethought to make sure that his message was incredibly clear. And Kaepernick maybe suffered from beginning his protest quietly without any intent to bring attention to it. And then when he spoke out against it, was probably not at all prepared for the backlash and had to sort of react in the moment in ways that not everybody thought was the perfect message.
So this is like one handful of preseason games. This is still the storyline we're talking about most. Like, this is not what it's going to be, right? All year long?
You brought it up. My storyline would have been Mitch Trubisky.
Well, we got there.
Super Bears, Super Bowl. I would have asked Mike about DeShone Kizer. He thinks the Browns are going to go to the Super Bowl. It's going to be,
All right. Well, we'll talk to Marc Trestman in about 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes or so, and we'll get to some football stuff. And, yeah, we can ask Mike about this is your highlight time of the year, right? The Browns aren't eliminated yet.
Dan Le Batard.
I have a friend. He was very early on. This is great. This is a great, awful story. It's early in the dating process. She has to go to the bathroom. Bathroom overflows with debris.
Ooh. Stugotz.
She's quietly trying to clean it up. He walks up the stairs and sees her on her hands and knees. They meet eyes, and she immediately begins sobbing. I mean, of course she's going to begin sobbing. And I would have begun sobbing.
I would have looked up and been like, what? It happens.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Get in touch with us through the 1-800-Flowers Twitter feed at Le Batard Show, at Iz Gutierrez, at Sarah Spain. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Mike, I just saw a highlight of DeShone Kizer making I believe this was the game-winning throw, but it was a 54-yard toss.
There was a game-winning. He had two long.
45, excuse me.
Yeah, he had two long ones. He had a 54 and a 45. I believe the 45 ended up winning the game. He had a really hot fourth quarter, played the entire second half. Great pocket presence at times. And obviously, as a Browns fan, you believe that you found your next franchise quarterback, and we're going to the Super Bowl.
Clearly. Didn't he say something pretty boastful when he first came out, or did he say, he was pretty confident he was going to be a heck of a player?
He called himself the combination of Cam Newton's body and Tom Brady's mind.
Oh, nice.
One of those two. Which, if you were watching last night, validation for DeShone Kizer.
Yeah, clearly. He established right off the jump that his self-assessment was accurate.
Who was your last franchise quarterback to be in your mind? Like, from a preseason performance, from an excitement, anticipation performance, was there one on that team that sort of gave you the feels the way maybe Kizer's going to do this?
Oh, the last time that I said, maybe this guy can do it, literally every year.
Every year.
Did you have that feeling about Johnny Manziel, or were you always suspect?
I wanted Manziel because he was good in college and he did that to Alabama. And then I knew rather quickly that that wasn't going to work out. Mm-hmm. Although if you look at the games, he wasn't that
The ones you mean the ones that he showed up for?
The ones that he showed up for. When that dude showed up,
that he wasn't in Vegas, yeah.
He was not that terrible. Charlie Fry, obviously.
Did you have John Beck in your history?
No.
That's not one of them? I remember one of the old Dolphins rejects ended up as a Browns starter. Can't remember which one it was. But, yeah, that's that line's going to go pretty long.
What's fascinating to me about this particular draft is, looking at where people went and then figuring out the thing is we always complain about draft grades right after because how are you going to know yet until they've played enough snaps to really get a gauge. But it's interesting to look at where the different quarterbacks went and then watch as they develop to see, was it worth it for Ryan Pace to trade up to get Mitch Trubisky, and why did he go for him instead of other quarterbacks that were out there? Like, what did he see? That kind of thing. Especially when there are people who trade up, like Goff, right? We're watching that, like wondering how big of a disaster that was. As we see whether he develops into a regular, useful quarterback or not, which I think we can do with this quarterback class a lot.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a longer play because the Browns passed up on Carson Wentz and took a trade, and it kind of looked like, at least midway through the season, that was a bad decision. Mm-hmm. And you have Trubisky and Deshaun Watson, two players that the Browns could have had, and you were feeling really bad if you were a Browns fan, and then Deshaun Kaiser sort of alleviated some of that stress anyways by by having that game-winning drive.
Yeah, he threw for 184 yards. 97 of those came on 2 passes, so I don't know what the rest of that looked like, but those 2 passes must have looked good.
Right. Well, the problem with that is it's awesome if you can get a 52-yard bomb, but you're throwing it to a street free agent against the third-string defense. So it's great you can accurately make that throw. Will a guy be available and open, and will a defense be playing that way in the regular season? Yet to be seen, which is why, as excited as I am about Trubisky, I, of course, clearly have to recognize that he's not playing at the speed, size, talent level of a regular season game.
Obviously, with the Kaiser throws, the throws themselves are impressive because of the distance that they traveled. But if you watch the actual highlight of those throws, there were so many things that went on going into it, stepping up in the pocket, avoiding pressure, going through your progressions, and that stuff that really gets you excited. I understand that you're going up against the third-string defense in the second half of an NFL preseason, but for a young quarterback to show that much poise, it's incredibly exciting.
There's some things you can analyze with a quarterback, regardless of the level of talent you're playing against. As long as it's not a giant drop-off, it's better than it was in college. Let's just put at least.
Well, and that's also what we were saying about Trubisky, right, is if you get into the details of, are they turning their shoulders? Are they running, left and then turning right? Are they, accurately, finding the seams and the holes, whatever? Like, that's stuff that you could do poorly against a poor defense or well against a poor defense. So at least
that running left and turning right? Do you look for that when you're watching quarterbacks? Like, he's running left and turning right. Oh, that was so nice.
When you've had enough quarterbacks that run left and then don't square their shoulders before throwing and then throw a pick into double coverage, then you do look for the little things like being able to square your shoulders and get your body right before you throw.
Yeah, but if you ever say that out loud during a get-together,
no, I don't say, "Wow, looking left and throwing right." Wow, looking left and turning right. No, not those exact words. By the way, quickly, speaking of me not being able to put words together correctly, I have been corrected in my assessment that the fist in the air is specifically related to the Black Panthers. It's more specific to just Black Power. So my apologies, and thank you for those who are correcting me. I want to make sure I get that right. So it is not specific to Black Panthers. It is more specific to Black Power. And either way, my assessment of it stands, but I want to correct that.
We're going to talk to Marc Trestman in about a little under 10 minutes here, but we'll talk to him about quarterbacks, etc. But there's some news sort of leaking out slowly about Ezekiel Elliott, and we have a tweet from Adam Schefter who tweeted, under terms of NFL personal conduct policy, Ezekiel Elliott could be facing potential 6-game suspension for allegation of physical violence. I don't know what that means in terms of which act it was that he's being suspended for, or if it's an accumulation, because there was domestic violence allegedly involved with him as well. But where people are going to get caught up on this is the allegation of physical violence. So suspended for 6 games for an allegation. They've been following this or sort of investigating this for a while now. And if this ends up being the suspension, it would be greater than most people expected. But it would also seemingly be in line in terms of the gravity of it, the harshness of it, with the NFL, because it seems like he's not just a one-time offender. He's done a few things here that early on they kind of want to nip in the bud and maybe punish him pretty harshly.
Will you read again the assessment that you got based on the claim of allegation being the cause of the suspension?
The tweet reads, Elliott could be facing potential 6-game suspension for allegation of physical violence.
And who wrote that?
That was Adam Schefter.
And when was that?
That was Hold, please. That was today, 11:07 a.m.
Because I don't think what he's saying is that the suspension would be for an allegation. He's saying the suspension is related to the alleged incident of, you see what I'm saying? It's about the semantics of how you read the tweet. If he is suspended, in fact, for 6 games, it is because those allegations, when investigated, the NFL believes there to be proof or enough evidence of it actually happening and therefore not being an allegation.
Yeah, we'll dissect that a little bit more as we go along here and try to figure out exactly if there's a difference there, like you mentioned.
Dan Le Batard.
Creepy as F.
Stugotz.
I had a cat, Schmitty. He died.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. The Fantasy Football Marathon is coming. 28 consecutive hours of football starts Monday night at 7 Eastern. Remember to sign up and play fantasy football on ESPN.com or in the ESPN Fantasy Football app. And now your SportsCenter update. Philadelphia Eagles safety Malcolm Jenkins stood at the 43-yard line and raised his fist over his head during the national anthem prior to Thursday's preseason opener at Green Bay. Earlier in the day, Jenkins told ESPN he plans on continuing his demonstration through the 2017 season. Neymar will be available to make his Paris Saint-Germain debut this weekend after Barcelona cashed the entire $222 million fee paid to trigger the player's release. For all the latest headlines and information, tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. We're going to go to the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line now. We'll find Toronto Argonauts head coach Marc Trestman. You might remember him coaching the Bears, and who's the guy who's become the most popular quarterback in the NFL these days, Jay Cutler. Right, Sarah?
Yes, that's right. Thanks so much for making time for us, Mark. Appreciate it.
Sarah, Izzy, it's a pleasure to be with you.
So we'll, of course, get into your return to the CFL and maybe some reflections on your time in Chicago. But obviously, you know, I mostly want to get your a couple years removed from your time with Jay Cutler, some of your insight on him for people in Miami that are wondering just what they're getting and wondering after all the years of reading headlines what's true and what isn't. What's sort of the vibe when you look back at your time with Jay Cutler, how he was as a quarterback and someone to work with?
Yeah, I think it's, my time with Jay was a very positive time. I can break it down on a personal and professional level. I mean, Jay Cutler is a heck of a father and a husband. He's a very bright guy. He's a philanthropic guy. He did a lot of things in the organization to help people that were support staff that he never talked about and nobody ever talked about. But, whether it was bonuses, Christmas gifts, and things like that, he was in tune to really helping people in the organization. And I thought that was always a positive thing in that regard. My first year with Jay, I found nothing more than a positive. Apologize for that if you're picking that up, Sarah.
Nope.
Still there?
You're good.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, sorry. Really, the first years I was saying nothing more than positive. Hardworking, very, very smart, great in the meeting room, always prepared for practice, seldom a flaw in his preparation in terms of calling plays and making reads and doing the right things. I found him, he worked through an injury in the first year. We wound up playing Jeff some of the time, but, I found him to be mentally tough and physically tough. And I know I'm throwing out a lot of positives, but that was my experience with him. And then in the second year after he got his contract, he didn't play as well. And frankly, Sarah and Izzy, I hold myself accountable for that. My job was to get the quarterback to play at a higher level. And in the second year, we weren't able to continue to ascend at the level that I expected or that Jay expected. And the results were as we all saw them.
We're talking to Marc Trestman, Toronto Argonauts head coach, former NFL head coach. Mark, I pulled up a story from late in 2014 where you admitted, that for whatever reason you haven't be able to get the best out of Jay. Now, not that you sit there for 3 years now and think back as to why that was the case, but when you look back, is there more of a why specific reason than another when it comes to why, you couldn't get the best out of him?
Yeah, I think that I think it goes a lot to that we really didn't surround him with enough. I mean, every quarterback needs something. They just can't do it entirely on their own. And, Jay showed us in the first year that he could, take over a game and win it. He did that late after he came back and from his injury. And again, that was part of the reason why, he was given the extension, because there was that progress. I think in the second year, I mean, that's a question, a little bit for Jay, but I don't think that we, gave them enough resources because of what was going on our football team for us to do it in a continuity football type of environment. And that's not to defend him. That's just to try to give you.
Did we lose him?
Yeah. Looks like we lost Mark there. Hopefully we can get him back really quickly. Sarah, when...
Yeah, because I wanted to ask him, there's so much... it's a lot of the stuff that I've kind of told you guys, that from what we heard inside, he worked really hard, he showed up early, he left late. I'm just curious then, is there a disconnect between what he achieved with the positives that he had and what could have been achieved if there were a couple tweaks to the things that seem to be sticklers for people and teammates,
Was that level of excitement there? You've got the Trestman, the quarterback guy, with Jay Cutler together. Like, that had to be the ultimate level of, okay, we finally found our guy, or we finally found our combination.
Well, at first it was, although I will say that a lot of people were kind of wondering, especially people who didn't know Trestman's lengthy background in the NFL, were wondering about passing on Bruce Arians, who was also available. And now it feels like that who's to say who would have, the fact that there were so many hires made to try to get to Jay and get the most out of him, I think could be frustrating for a lot. The number of offensive coordinators, quarterbacks, head coaches, that
we've got Mark back, actually, Sarah, if you wanted to go ahead and sort of clarify that question.
Sorry about that, Sarah. I can finish. Where did I leave off?
We got, I think, most of it. I guess a lot of what you're saying, the positives, I think, are the things that we hear. Hard worker, tough guy, played through injury. I wonder if you think he would have made his life easier on the media side and with some teammates who he didn't click with, if he cared a little bit more about the impression that he gave with his body language or his facial expressions or his energy and his voice. I know that that's not the most important thing when it comes to a quarterback, but adding the positives he already possessed, if he had added those, do you think it would have made much of a difference in the success he had?
Well, I think that's a relevant question. I think that I really can't answer that, because he was the same guy ascending, and we were having success early on in the 13th season, him being the guy he was. And when we weren't playing as well, then everything diverted to the things that he wasn't, or the perception of what he wasn't. So, again, I think that's really a question for him and how he handles himself. That we were a very productive offense in year one in Chicago when he was playing, and as a result, as I said, he got the contract that the organization felt that he deserved, and then it went south for a lot of different reasons. And when it starts to go south, those other things become important, and demeanor is important, and how you carry yourself is important, how you relate to the media certainly is important, but we were moving in the right direction, and Jay was the guy he was.
Mark,
so that's a difficult answer for me, other than to say what I've said.
Without specifically talking about Jay Cutler here, I'm just curious, as somebody who knows quarterback, as somebody who's known to be obviously very good with quarterbacks, what level of importance do you place that sort of that demeanor on? And I'm not talking in the media. I'm talking about amongst teammates. I'm talking about that expectation that we have about quarterbacks in terms of how they carry themselves. Is it really necessary in your view?
I think it's part of the package. I think most quarterbacks in some way transcend the locker room in some way, and Jay he's a unique personality, no doubt about it. There's quarterbacks who are quiet, that say very little. There's other quarterbacks that are more vocal, not only on the field but off the field. I think the bottom line is when they're playing, do you get results? Are you moving the football team? Are you scoring? Are you playing at a level where when guys walk into work every day, they know that the guy under center is going to give them hope? Because that's the key. That's the key thing is that the quarterback's got to give the team hope. He's flying the plane. There is no autopilot here, and part of that is demeanor. And so, when it's not going as well, it sometimes becomes more of a focal point.
talking to Toronto Argonauts head coach Marc Trestman, formerly coach of the Bears. And before we let you go, I have to ask you, we've had so much fun at your expense over the years for something that you said mistakenly in your introductory press conference in Chicago. And I wonder how long you fumed over saying accidentally we're going to be a team that's selfish and undisciplined.
Well, sometimes it manifests itself into reality, huh?
Right, exactly. It was prophetic of you. I don't think it's what you intended, but we've had fun with the soundbite.
Yeah, obviously not. And, I look at my time in Chicago as a positive. It may not be perceived that way, and certainly it isn't on a number of levels. But, the time there, I think we did some things we can be proud of, and certainly some things that, we can learn from. And that's the way we've approached this area, along the way. I mean, you can't look back, and all you can do is learn from those moments and move forward, and that's what we've done.
Mark,
Absolutely.
Good luck with the rest of your season in the CFL, and thanks so much for taking out the time.
Yeah, all the best, you guys. See you down the road.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Don't forget, you can hear more of my sons Dan and Stu weekdays starting at 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shades.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Don Le Batard. Jeff Van Gundy looked like the guy at the gym who pees out of the bottom of his shorts.
Stugotz.
Is that a wrong thing?
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And now your SportsCenter update. Canadian teenager Denis Shapovalov upset top-seeded Rafael Nadal. Really? 3-6, 6-4, 7-6 in the third round of the Rogers Cup on Thursday night. The New York Knicks and Houston Rockets have re-engaged in trade talks involving 10-time All-Star Carmelo Anthony, with the Rockets again canvassing third-team trade partners to construct a deal, league sources told ESPN. For all the latest headlines and information, tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. Here we go with that story again, Sarah. Carmelo Anthony basically quietly begging other teams across the league, help me get out of here.
Yep.
Speaking of,
Nick's got to get something back. His trade value is low. Rockets got nothing, so they got to find that third team, and they're struggling.
Find a way to get him out of New York. It'll just make the season more interesting, because I don't think anybody wants to see that whole storyline happen again. But
Anyone
to the
who
more
hates the
interesting stories. Yes. So Kevin Durant was having a discussion, or was being interviewed, and had a quote, which, of course, right when I try to pull it up, the computer doesn't really work for me. But okay, here we go. He was talking about his taking a discount. This was to The Athletic on Thursday. He said he wanted to make sure that Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, Steph Curry get paid what they deserve. He said, quote, I'm a smart guy and I want to keep this thing going. And looking at Andre and Sean and Steph, they all should make the most money that they can make and get what they deserve, because they were all underpaid, and I knew at some point they'd want to get what they deserve. So I just took a step back and let the chips fall where they may. Then I took it in my hands. I wanted to keep the team together, and I thought it was going to help the ownership bring all the guys back. And on top of that, it's my money. It's my decision. I can do what the hell I want with it. And he went on to reference a couple of guys who've done it in the past. He said they only criticized it because it's the Warriors and it's me, and they love to hate anything we do right now. A lot of players have taken pay cuts. It wasn't that I wanted the praise. I've learned from Tim Duncan and Dirk Nowitzki and how it has helped them over the years, and I thought if they did it, why can't I? Excuse me. Why shouldn't I sacrifice? People wanted the money to break us up, and I didn't want that to happen. And what I think of immediately when I hear somebody of his stature, at somebody of his level, which clearly commands the most he can get paid in the NBA, I immediately go back to LeBron, and as he's basically leaving Miami, assuring or telling everybody I'm going to take nothing less than the max, he could have, in a Kevin Durant, Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan kind of way, kept going what was happening in Miami. maybe they didn't have all the pieces at the time to maintain a dynasty, but with a little help from him and a pay cut from the guys and him obviously setting the tone, they could have done those types of things. And it makes me wonder if, and Mike, feel free to chime in here as the resident Heat fan, does that make LeBron the worst?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course he's the worst. Why are you asking a dumb question? He's the worst.
Well, okay, let me ask a non-Heat fan the question.
Is he the worst? That's the easiest one.
Well, because he was being praised.
Lots of decipher there.
Mike, he was being praised for it, right? He was being praised for saying, why should I have to take the pay cut? I'm the man. Everybody should want to play with me and take a pay cut. And I'm saying to myself, yeah, that's also true, but how many people have done this? But then there's the other side of it is, are all these other guys only doing it because of LeBron? Because they saw the landscape, because they know, hey, this is my best chance to beat that guy, if all the rules stay the same, that guy's going to be on a championship level team every year.
Did LeBron just assume that they would follow his template all the way? I formed super teams. I took a little bit less the first time, but then the second time, guys, here's the real kicker. I take a full max.
Yeah.
No, why would you do that?
Well, because you've already won your championship, and you are clearly the guy. Again, those other guys should want to play with you, KD, not the other way around. I don't think KD's there yet because he's only played one season, and obviously Steph and Clay and Draymond are critically important to that team.
It's part of the interesting conundrum LeBron finds himself in as a member of the hierarchy in the NBA Players Union. He has
is at the top.
He has to take the max in order to set an example for other players, but the other players don't necessarily have to follow that example. And while they don't follow that example, they're costing LeBron James titles. So I wouldn't be surprised if LeBron James takes less with his next contract if he's interested at all about challenging the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, because the Players Association, Sarah, can't love when Kevin Durant does this necessarily, right?
Why?
Because he's setting a tone as first of all, they're probably unhappy that he even has a max salary, right? Because it shouldn't be there. You should be able to get paid what you're worth. But on top of that, you're not even reaching that max salary. Now, they could argue that he's giving it to, or it's coming back to mid-level players, which a lot of people complain don't get paid.
And before we get to Sarah's thoughts on this, it should be noted, didn't Chris Paul have a trade kicker in his contract that he waived in order to help
I remember Carmelo being willing to waive his trade kicker. I don't remember the Chris Paul.
I think Chris Paul might have waived his as president of the Players Association. That's certainly
although that's a little different given that it's money that really isn't there. You know, you never really think to yourself, oh, I'm going to get traded and get those $8 million. It's always like, it's just a bonus.
He's recouping that money in no state taxes in Texas.
True. Go ahead, Sarah.
First of all, who is KD responding to? I don't think I've heard people criticize him for taking less money. Who did I miss that was critical of that?
The haters.
The haters. It's basically them saying,
media, the evil media.
It's already so easy for him. Now he's making it even easier.
Right, but if I from what I've heard, it's basically just people saying, wow, that's a really great move by him to not only get his boys paid, but keep the team together and ensure future success. And while it may be easy for us to say from here, do you need that extra money when you're as rich as you are? Wouldn't you rather be happy and have a chance at winning all the time and whatever else? You know, that's not usually how it goes. But when you've reached a certain amount of money, and again, I would think LeBron at this point would be better served and happier existentially as a human being and as he creates a legacy and as he nears the end of his career, getting as much success as possible instead of as much money as possible, because he has more money than you could ever do anything with and is set to make tremendous amounts of money after his playing career is over, too. So while I don't think that KD's necessarily trying to show up LeBron, I do think this is an example of where, had you seen LeBron already in the past be willing to take a little bit less, he'd probably have, it would have paid off for him. It's the same way that I think anytime Carmelo Anthony says he's all about winning, you have to point to the fact that he's never been willing to take pay cuts in order to shore up the talent around him. And would he be happier and not be stuck in a miserable situation where they never win if he had ever been willing to care more about that than he is about money? Yes.
Yeah, it is interesting because it can fall apart really quickly when he says they wanted the money to break us up. It absolutely could have happened when you consider it only took one. It would only take one slightly different approach by KD. Obviously, won the championship, won his finals MVP, and he could have said, yeah, I'll take some less. I'll take a little bit less, but not entirely. I can make up for if we lose a Sean Livingston, if we do this, if we do that. And then sort of the dominoes fall in a way where we're just like, okay, money is still sort of gurgling. It's still right there on the surface in terms of something that is very, very important to this group and could break us up. But when he sets that tone, not only does he sort of play the card, but he's also play the card of the good guy, the leader, keeps this thing together. But it also allowed, and we talk about the Players Association, it allowed Steph Curry to get that record-breaking contract. So the Players Association won't say, oh, look at that guy not taking what he's worth. It's, wow, look at this guy. He set a record. He might have waited a couple of years because he took an undervalued contract because we didn't know how good he was going to be. But look, it's going to pay off in the end, and they could sell you on the same thing when it comes to Kevin Durant. Yes, he's doing the right thing, keeping the team success, and it will pay off literally in the end.
Well, and that's the only way. If you remember when Jeff Van Gundy kind of went on his rant about how sad he was that we now know who's going to win the next title for the next 6 to 8 years, and we were like, wait, hold on. First of all, that would assume that everybody's willing to stick around for that long, that the kind of like the role player guys won't get a couple titles or, a handful of titles and then say, that's enough, I'm going to go get my money somewhere else, which still could happen. But this ability of a star to take less in order to keep the team together, this is a great starting point just 1 year after he arrives in terms of setting the stage for a team that might be willing to do more of that sacrificing in order to do some real dynastic stuff here.
And also not shocking, Kevin Durant applauding the GMs who are swinging for the fences here, like Daryl Morey or Oklahoma City and Minnesota and those teams. He said you're seeing a lot of these GMs buckling down and saying, you know what, let's swing for the fences. Let's see what we can do. Anything can happen. You got to respect it. It is fun. It's fun for the fans. It also, in my opinion, should drive the asking price for GMs up, because if that's what your job is, to try to create a dream team scenario, and difficult it is, but it's possible. Like these GMs
well,
should
but
be
also,
paid a ton.
I agree with you. It makes it really fun for us as media to talk about. It makes it fun for the offseason. It makes it fun when you're watching those specific teams. It also means that the talent is really, 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 really limited in terms of what teams you're watching and whether they're any good, right? Like it's so top heavy on those certain teams that the rest of the league is kind of trash.
Don Le Batard. This guy writes in, due to my love and support for the show, I have decided to take on the heavy lifting and establish this petition to get Stugotz on Around the Horn. Stugotz. In order to sign, please send an email to gotsthehorn@gmail.com. No, hold on, it gets better. Including your name, address, date of birth, social security number, mother's maiden name, an image of your signature, bank routing, and account number. Hashtag not a scam.
Attaboy.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
If you missed any of the show, you can listen to all 3 hours of the Dan Le Batard Show on demand in the ESPN app, plus our Miami-only hour that airs before the show, and now you can subscribe to our Best Of podcast. It's all available in the Listen tab of the ESPN app. Tune into an AL East rivalry on Sunday Night Baseball as the Yankees host the Red Sox. Coverage of Sunday Night Baseball begins at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com, and the ESPN app, and at 8 p.m. on ESPN. So we're hearing officially from Adam Schefter, now at least via Twitter, that Ezekiel Elliott is indeed going to serve a 6-game suspension.
Right, he has a couple days to try to appeal it, and we'll see if he ends up getting it reduced. We've certainly seen that in the past in the NFL with longer suspensions. But as of now, it's 6, and they have a bye in Week 7, so he would not be on the field if this holds true until Week 8 of the season.
Yeah, that's, as Mike put it during the break, a fantasy killer, if you will. You lose one of the most...
For fantasy football and for Dallas fans, I would think,
for Dallas fans, yeah,
to have him out for that long. I mean, I'm first of all, I'm already seeing the hot takes rolling in. I'm intrigued, and I mentioned this to Mike before the show even started, before we had the official word about his suspension. The NFL instituted a policy where first-time domestic violence offenders would serve a minimum 6 games. And the intent with that was that after the Ray Rice scandal, there was so much discussion about how 2 games wasn't enough. And then he eventually was just cut from the team and never returned. And with all the following, instances of domestic violence, people didn't know what to expect. There was no consistency in the rulings, and people felt as though Roger Goodell had too much power and control as the commissioner to rule based on whatever he felt for each individual instance. So they instituted that policy of a minimum of 6 games, which I believe they have only doled out once. Every other instance of domestic violence, even in Josh Brown's case where he admitted to it, were reduced suspensions. And they allowed for mitigating factors to have an effect on it, which I understand because it is very difficult to assess the same penalty to crimes with vastly different, or you don't have to call them crimes because some of them don't end up in criminal punishment, to incidents with different details. I totally get that, right? Sometimes there is drastically more evidence or detail or there's other things involved like weapons or injury. But the point of the policy was to establish some sort of consistency and a marker by which you would go by. And to have only doled it out now, in theory, twice, we'll see if it stands, eliminates the whole purpose of it.
Yeah, it seems like the NFL has, at least with this, been trying to be very careful with it. It seems like they've had something there, like whether it be the Chris Carter suggesting that something is going to come out about this, or just the time that's been taken on this, and the sort of not really varying, but the growing sentiment as the time went along that, this is going to be a definite suspension. It's going to be 2. Now it's going to be 6. That they know there's something serious here. I wonder if it is strictly, as you say, not strictly, but if it is as much as you say a 6-game suspension for this Domestic Violence Act to remain consistent, like you said, or whether it's sort of an accumulation of all the issues and then just threw that number out there because it is that the number that they threw out for the domestic violence.
Right. Right. It might be that they were taking into account the other incidents, and it certainly sounded like in the recent days that was something that was being reported, that they were not just considering. I think even Jerry Jones alluded to that it wasn't just about the domestic violence. They also might be giving him 6 under the presumption that it will get reduced down via appeal, so that there's still a couple games. They might know that if they only give him 2 and he appeals and it gets down to 1 or 0, that there will be backlash. But like I said, I'm already seeing some hot takes, and we don't know yet what came out evidence-wise. We don't know what the suspension was about. But as I mentioned a month ago, people complaining about the length of the investigation, that intrigued me. And Jane McManus, a former coworker of ours, has sources within the NFL who said the reason for the length of the investigation was not the sort of cynical idea that we all had, which was that they were trying to distance it from his spectacular Rookie of the Year season, was instead that they were really digging in deep to an investigation that had a lot of parts. It was taking a long time to get through all the evidence and everything else. And it certainly seems like a 6-game suspension would point to there being a fair amount of evidence and a fair amount of details to go through to arrive at this conclusion.
For those who still have issue or take issue with the NFL punishing something that the legal system could not. This was Robert Tobias. He is principal assistant city attorney in Columbus and director of its prosecution resources unit. He told this to USA Today Sports in regard to this matter. He said, for the Ezekiel Elliott matter, I personally believe that there were a series of interactions between Mr. Elliott and his accuser where violence occurred. However, given the totality of the circumstances, I could not firmly conclude exactly what happened. Saying something happened versus having sufficient evidence to criminally charge someone are 2 completely different things. Charging decisions are taken very seriously, and we use best efforts to conduct thorough and detailed investigations. So again, just because he wasn't criminally charged or rather convicted of this does not mean that something didn't happen, and the NFL has to sort of find a way to punish that, because that's their current policy.
Right. And also, there is the possibility that she was willing to cooperate with the NFL investigation and not with police. There is a possibility that, if you remember with Greg Hardy, that he was convicted and then he used essentially a loophole to get it retried and then got out of it. And there was an immense amount of evidence. There were people who were witnesses. We know that it is incredibly difficult to actually get charged on these cases. We've seen it over and over again, whether it's sexual assault or domestic violence. There is such a small percentage of cases that eventually even result in a charge and then result in a case and then result in a trial and then result in someone actually being found guilty, that the NFL's decision to decide to punish due to violation of the code of conduct because it looks bad. Some people are never going to agree with that. And I know Dan does. And I know Dan thinks that they shouldn't be policing their players in a way that should be reserved for the law. But knowing what we know about how rarely the law can find the cause to affect, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that's very different than finding enough evidence to decide that you want to suspend someone for a couple games, right? I mean, you're not meeting the same standard as the NFL.
A few numbers, if Cowboys fans want to get scared a little bit of the idea of 6 games without Ezekiel Elliott to start the season. The Cowboys offense with Ezekiel Elliott on the field last year, yards per play 6.2 without him, 5.4. Yards per rush with him, 5.1. Without him, 3.8. And the passer rating, this is a pretty big drop. Passer rating while Zeke is on the field, 113.5. With him off the field, 88.1. So that it's going to be a lot on Darren McFadden and Alfred Morris there in that Cowboys offense. On the other side, we're going to talk to J.A. Adande. He's one of my journalism heroes, actually, and he's leaving ESPN, so we're going to talk to him about his time here and why he's going to move on and focus on his work at Northwestern University. And for those who love the club on Fridays, the club will be opened. The club will be open today, a rare occasion for Dan and Stugotz, because the club's getting too big. It's getting too big for Dan and Stu. It's got its own little personality and its own
There's a cover now, too, which is a real bummer.
Oh, that sucks. I'm not doing that. No cover for me. Somebody get me through the line.
It's
Izzy Gutierrez and Sarah Spain filling in for Dan Batard and Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Dan Batard. What I've chosen to do for a living is stupid. I've dedicated my life to swimming in a pool of stupidity.
Stugotz. Well, it was the perfect career choice for me.
This is the Dan Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Dan Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. The Fantasy Football Marathon is coming. 28 consecutive hours of football starts Monday night at 7 Eastern. Remember to sign up and play fantasy football on ESPN.com or in the ESPN Fantasy Football app. And now for your SportsCenter update. Canadian teenager Denis Shapovalov upset top-seeded Rafael Nadal in the third round of the Rogers Cup Thursday night. The Knicks and Rockets have re-engaged in trade talks involving Carmelo Anthony, with the Rockets again canvassing third-team trade partners to construct a deal, league sources told ESPN. Keep your family and home safe with the best product on the market, Blink Home Security. Order now and get 3 Blink cams for what the other guys charge for 1, plus an extra 10% off. Go to blinkprotect.com/Dan. That's blinkprotect.com/Dan. For all the latest headlines and information, tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. Before we get to J.A. Adande on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, quick story. I did work at the Miami Herald for like 9 years. ESPN along the time had offered me a couple of jobs along the way, not really ideal for what I was looking for. And then right around 2012, late in the year, I got a call, and within the conversation I had with somebody who was trying to sell me on coming to ESPN was this idea of being kind of an East Coast version of J.A. Adande. And we could have stopped the conversation right there because that was the perfect job for me. J.A. Adande is one of the guys that I've listened to, I've read, I've watched over the years at ESPN, and I'm guessing a lot of NBA fans right around my age range, maybe a little younger even, just associate J.A. with the NBA and also, with his work on Around the Horn. And J.A., who's on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line right now, is leaving ESPN after a decade. Makes me sad, but J.A., thanks for taking out the time, and just tell me why the heck you're leaving.
It's time. I've been likening it to asking someone to be the team GM and the coach in the NBA. We've seen that usually doesn't work that well. It's difficult to do both jobs. And when I took the Northwestern job last year, I thought it'd be feasible to do both, and I also kind of wanted to maintain. I wasn't ready to give that up. I wasn't ready to let go of something that had been so essential to my identity. But now, having attempted to do both and seeing the impossibility of having 2 jobs that each have multiple components, and also just for some reason a year later, I am comfortable moving into this aspect of my life full time, and completely dedicating myself to raising the next crop. So raising somebody to be the next Israel Gutierrez, or the West Coast Israel Gutierrez.
may be able to pull a Kevin Blackistone and still make appearances on Around the Horn while doing that. Do you want to do that, or is it easier for you to make a clean break and just focus on academia?
I'd like to, if I can, to be the Midwest Kevin Blackistone, if we can put it that way.
Can't be the professor, though. We need a new name.
I think that's still a possibility. We'll see. Some things need to be sorted out. I could still make some contributions to other ESPN platforms on a freelance basis as well. That's something that has come up. I don't think it's complete. I don't think I'm disappearing from the team completely. But it is, the notion of, full time and just being caught up in the craziness of the NBA life in particular. It's funny. It just dawned on me today that I won't be working on Christmas Day, which I believe is the first time since 1998 that I won't be working an NBA game on Christmas Day.
First time since 98?
Yes.
That's
because
nuts.
once the Lakers moved in the Staples Center and it was, the Phil Jackson era, so the Lakers were basically a fixture on Christmas Day for, throughout the entirety of the Kobe Shaq era. So that was, 99 through mid-2000s. And then right around then is when I shifted to ESPN, and the Lakers were still a Christmas Day team, and or the Clippers. They always had one of those two teams on Christmas. So I was out there in LA, and I was available. So that meant I was working Christmas Day. I just came to assume it. Now I think, I could go somewhere. I could do something on Christmas. That's the first time in almost 20 years.
It's overrated. Christmas, totally overrated.
I'm not a big Christmas guy. You're right. I'm more of a Thanksgiving guy.
I'm kidding, by the way. Christmas is my absolute favorite. I hate when I have to leave. That's why I usually do it the morning of Christmas Day and celebrate Christmas Eve with the family. We're talking to J.A. Adande, who will soon be only of Northwestern University and not of ESPN anymore.
I think as of midnight tonight officially.
Oh, really? Wow, so sad. So your career, not just with ESPN, but your career spanned over Jordan, Kobe, Shaq, LeBron eras. Like, what are some of the most memorable moments you've had within those? And it's going to feel kind of weird for you to not be like directly involved, right, in the NBA. Like, you can't just like text the next great superstar because you have a good relationship with him.
Yeah, that's going to be strange. It's funny. Tim Kawakami and Bill Plaschke and Tim Brown, so my colleagues at the LA Times, during the Kobe Shaq, that repeat run at the start of 2000, they had a little Twitter thing going on yesterday, and I joined in. And, we really came to the conclusion that run, that repeat run, and really the stuff that surrounded it, too. Even, going through that 2003-4 season with Karl Malone and Gary Payton and Kobe Bryant going through the sexual assault pretrial, and everything that surrounded that, the breakup of that team is so dramatic. The highs and the lows, the high level, the on-court, the off-court machinations, nothing will top that run. There might be better individual events and singular stories that I've covered, but for an extended period, for me, nothing's going to top that. I caught the end of the first repeat in Chicago. That was my first year working at the Chicago Times. So that was my first finals in 1993, Jordan versus Barkley. And for a long time, that was the best NBA finals that I covered. I think the Heat Spurs 2013, Izzy, when Ray Allen hit the shot, right?
Yep, 2013.
That was right up there. The series as a whole wasn't that great, but those last two games in particular, and the first game was really good too. You had three really good games, and that game 6 is an all-timer. And that moment was so just exhilarating to be in there. It was so dramatic when Ray Allen hit that shot. That's one of the best singular moments I've experienced, and that might be the best series, or maybe the second best in 93. I think the best overall series I covered non-finals was Lakers-Kings 2002 conference finals. Everything from Kobe getting sick to the uproar over all the fouls called in Game 6 to, buzzer-beating shots in Game 4 by Robert Horry and by Bibby, and in Game 5 and Game 7, overtime, Western Conference Finals in Arco Arena, the noise in there, my ears are still ringing from how loud it was in there. That's one of the most memorable games I've covered. There's a lot of stuff stands out, and I feel like I don't know what the next era is, but, to feel like I covered the Jordan era, I covered the Kobe repeat, all the Spurs teams in the 2000s, and now seeing where it's at now. Seeing LeBron get his first couple championships, seeing Steph Curry and seeing a team win a championship that way, which is so different from the NBA that I first covered in the 90s. I feel like I've seen and been around for a complete evolution of the league.
I wonder what you're going to miss the most from the job.
The people being inside, like Izzy implied, not being able to have that access necessarily and being as inside. And I'm sure a lot of the relationships I have will continue. I'll still be able to call. I heard from a lot of my NBA sources yesterday, and they were calling or texting to wish well. But and Izzy, you can relate to this, having done sidelines too. It kind of hit me this year. We were sitting and having our pregame meeting with Luke Walton doing a Laker game. And, you're just, and Steve Kerr came in and these behind the scenes moments that you see and get to be a part of. And it really hit me that, I've been in the NBA. I've never played on for an NBA team. But when you do this and, particularly when you get the type of access you doing games for ESPN, you're really in the NBA. You're inside at the inner level. You're surrounded by it. And that's been pretty cool to me. And doing sidelines also enabled me to be on an NBA court during a game. There was a moment, my first year doing sidelines, it was a Clippers Oklahoma City game, Staples Center, and it was a tense game, and the lead was getting away from the Clippers. We came out, and Doc Rivers, he was just amped. He was really, Doc's always one of the more pleasant guys to do the interview with. He appreciates it. He used to be a broadcaster, but I could just tell he was really just excited to be in the moment, regardless of the score. He lived for this, the level of competition. And here I was right in the middle of it, and I was excited. Seeing Doc excited made me excited. And I realized, hey, I'm right in the middle of this too. And that was a really fun moment for me. It was very enjoyable.
Where I got that same feeling, J.A., was you feel like you're a part of it and I wasn't even there. I was watching, and I think this was the last year that Stuart Scott was working the finals, and he was just ill, I believe, and Doris ended up giving out the trophy after, I believe, the Heat won. I said to myself, wow, I want to give out the NBA championship trophy one day. That, you never really think of NBA sideline goals, but that seems pretty darn cool, and that's something that will always be seen for, decades and decades and decades, and as they release these videos. So it's there's this element of you that's part of it as well, and so that's really cool. You in particular, I've always thought as being associated with the NBA. What's the coolest interaction you've had away from the floor that kind of made you feel like, wow, I'm kind of famous here?
With a player or an NBA member? Or?
Either way, whether it be a player or a fan.
Some of my favorite stuff I've been talking about lately is just the fact that back in the days, you'd go out in L.A. to the clubs, back when I was going out in the clubs, and you'd see Jerry Buss, the owner of the Lakers. He'd be out there hanging in the club, and the night he basically told me and another reporter that, he made it clear, he didn't outright say it, but it was pretty clear that Phil Jackson was going to be a Goner in 2004. And we just sat there and said, wow, Phil Jackson's gone. He was sitting there and he said, yeah, the triangle offense, it kind of had some cobwebs on it. And my friend and I just looked at each other like, wow, this is it. Phil's gone. Of
in
course,
the club, you learned that.
Phil Jackson was gone, yeah. So that was a moment. Just a lot of fun times, talking with Michael Jordan for an hour. Me and Mike Wilbon wound up talking to Michael Jordan for an hour at the lobby bar at the Hard Rock Hotel one time. And it was funny because, we said, Mike, you never spent this much time with us before. And he said, yeah, before you guys were on TV, I knew the faces and I'd see the bylines, but I couldn't really connect them. Now I know who you guys are because, I see you guys on TV. So that's something that changed, being on Around the Horn and being on television through, the game so much. You walk in the locker room now and the players, the rookies even, they know who you are, and you don't even have to introduce yourself. That was the biggest jump in the last, say, 15 years, as opposed to the first 5-10 years when I was a newspaper reporter, and you had to go up and kind of start from scratch. You started from this level of trust. There's an implicit trust for some reason that people have. They think they know you, when they see you on TV. As you know, both of you, the television persona is probably different from who you are in real life, but people see you on TV and they think they know who you are. And Izzy, by the way, I think I unintentionally stole from you with my lead-in to my little note yesterday because I said a few words. Wasn't that how you led into your famous blog post from a couple years ago?
Not exactly, but I did note a little bit of an element similarity there. But
okay.
It's all right. You can.
It's funny because I saw that you liked it, and I realized, you know what? I think that's how Izzy did his as well. And so I couldn't really put too many coherent thoughts together. It was like 6 a.m. after a night in New Orleans when I got up and wrote that. But it dawned on me later that, I think that's how Izzy did his, too.
Hey, you're the man.
People were expecting something similar from me.
Really? Dude, you're the man. I appreciate everything you've done for me in my career, and good luck with the rest of everything that you're going to do in your career, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. And I think you'll still kind of be seeing me around and associated with me in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. I hope so. Thanks again.
You can listen to the Dan Le Batard Show